Hey, shalom, shalom, shalom lakam, which is peace unto you all. Ha'ay rab tawab la atam za'ach yakam yawam man rachakadol Charlotte, which is good evening. This is your brother Yawan from the GMS camp in Charlotte. Nachamatam kaya ha malakat hashemayim kwa ra. Repent ye, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Call halayim la abanawa Yahweh bahasham Yahweh shai bahasham rocha hakodash wa mashana la zakwanim na wa malakam shal rocha hagadol, which is all praises to our Father Yahweh, which means He exists. Bahasham, in the name Yahweh Shai delivers. And double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstones. Adabaryam, this is Deuteronomy chapter 22, and we'll start at verse 25. It says, "But if a man find a betrothed damsel in the field, and the man force her and lie with her, then the man only that lay with her shall die. But unto the damsel thou shalt do nothing. There is in the damsel no sin worthy of death. For as when a man riseth against his neighbor and slayeth him, even so is this matter." All right, so ultimately, it wouldn't be a sin worthy of death, because we're going to get the reason right here in verse 27 for the damsel. So it says, "For he found her in the field, and the betrothed damsel cried, and there was none to save her." All right, because ultimately, in that type of situation, all right, ultimately, the woman crying out. All right, going back up to verse 20, verse 24 says, "Then ye shall bring them both out unto the gate of that city, and ye shall stone them with the stones that they die, the damsel because she cried not, being in the city, and the man because he hath humbled his neighbor's wife. So thou shalt put away evil from among you." So ultimately, in a situation to where like as this, the woman's supposed to cry out, if she was betrothed, or if she was married, which betrothed goes into to be engaged, or to be promised, to a man. So it says, verse 27, "For he found her in the field, and the betrothed damsel cried, and there was none to save her." So ultimately, only the man will be put to death. Verse 28, "If a man find a damsel that is a virgin, which is not betrothed," so a damsel is of marriageable age. It says, "which is not betrothed," she's not engaged, "and lay hold on her and lie with her, and they be found." All right, so let's go into this word for damsel. It says na'ira, and it says marriageable young woman. All right, I'm going back. It says which is not betrothed. All right, but betrothed means to be engaged, and it says and lie with her. All right, shakab, it says to lie. It says to ravish. All right, which this is ultimately going into what's been called, the grape doctrine. All right, which ultimately, in Esau's world, how that would be solved, or which it really isn't solving anything, but how it's handled in Esau society is that, he gives the man a certain amount of, a certain amount of years or whatever, 15, 20, 30 years, or some of that effect. And what that does is ultimately it leaves, a woman, single, if a child was to come out of that circumstance. All right, and it's a childless father, you see, but then also you got a woman that's single, so to speak, and then she has to worry about raising a child. You see, with this, I'm gonna get this real fast. Zayashaya, this is Isaiah chapter 26, and we'll get verse 9. That says, "With my soul have I desired thee in the night, yea, with my spirit within me will I seek thee early. For when thy judgments are in the earth, the inhabitants of the world will learn righteousness." And ultimately, with righteousness in effect, ultimately it brings equity, it brings balance. You see, because how Esau has everything running, all right, it's no balance. It says that word for righteousness. It says tazadak, and it says justice, rightness, righteousness. What is right or just or normal? Rightness, just, weights and measures. All right, so ultimately keeping things in the correct balance. All right, so going back to this precept that we were at, you see, because ultimately in Esau society, all right, he has it to where, all right, he locks the man up, all right, for years at a time. All right, the child doesn't have a father. Okay, it's a single woman, so to speak. And then, you know, the woman has like the emotional baggage or whatever, you know. So going into this again, verse 20, verse 28 or verse 29, and it says, then the man that lay with her shall give unto the damsel's father 50 shekels of silver, and she shall be his wife, because he hath humbled her. He may not put her away all his days. You see, so it could be, you know, like it could be to where, or in this circumstance, you know, this, you know, the righteousness goes back to the law, all right, and ultimately that man isn't able to put away that woman all the days of his life. You see, and this is set in effect, you know, to ultimately, it's a deterrence, you know, because when we read this again, it says, then the man that lay with her shall give unto the damsel's father 50 shekels of silver. Now, if this was a circumstance of where the man was acting rash, you know, now he has to, you know, you know, he has to ultimately put up with that woman, you know, say, he essentially laid with her. All right, he finds out, you know, hey, he shouldn't have made that move. Now he can't put her away. All right, and then on top of that, you know, he has to pay that 50 shekels of silver, which, you know, in the ancient world, all right, ultimately that wasn't easy to come by. You know, so this ultimately is set as a deterrence in how you would essentially handle this matter. All right, how Esau does it. All right, it ultimately goes back to this. Zamashawya, this is Proverbs chapter 16, and we'll give verse 11, and it says, let me see. Now we'll get Proverbs 11, and it says, verse 1, it says, a false balance is abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. You see, so ultimately, you know, when you look at Esau's law system, what he deems as just, right, and normal, all right, it's diverse. It's abomination, you see, because ultimately it throws off the balance, it throws off the scales, you see, because ultimately it does a couple things as you know, to reiterate in the spirit, you know, it leaves a single mother, all right, that, you know, she will be broken from that, all right. Then on top of that, you know, the child, they have to grow up without you know, a father, and then they don't know what it's like to have their biological father in the picture, you know. So just how the Lord has it set up, you know, ultimately, you know, to keep things just, right, and normal and righteousness, this is how you would handle that specific situation. All right, when we approach the law, you know, we got to think. All right, it wasn't made with a Western mindset. You know, when we think about Westernization, that really stems back from Hellenization. All right, and how they used to think in Greece. All right, roughly paraphrasing, you know, it would be something that's posed to them. All right, they feel a certain way, they act a certain off of that feeling. Then they have a thought. Then they ultimately continue to make those decisions based off how they feel, as long as it works for them or works for them. All right. Whereas in the Eastern mindset, going back to the scriptures, all right, we read the scriptures. Okay. We make a conscious effort, all right, to fear the Lord and do us correct. From that, you know, we see the results. All right, and it's a continual process in which the latter is a better outcome. You know, so when we look at the laws, we got to think about them, and we got to look at them in the Eastern perspective. You know, because they were written in the Eastern perspective, and it was written, all right, how the Lord essentially designed the world. All right, so let's get a couple more. You know, because these laws are again set in place to keep a a perfect balance. All right, this is Zamashawya. This is Proverbs chapter 16 and verse 11. It says, a just weight and balance are the Lord's, all the weights of the bag are his work. All right, so let's get a couple more laws, which, you know, these are going to I'm gonna go back to this right here. This is Deuteronomy, or back to Deuteronomy, the 22nd chapter. It says sundry laws. Then it says also, I'm gonna look at this word for sundry in the subtitle, and it says various. All right, so various. All right, then let's get this. It says laws of morality. So ultimately, again, going into righteousness. All right, in which, in in today's perspective, these will be viewed as rough laws or severe laws. And again, these are set in place, to deter different types of behaviors and to keep different types of spirits, all right, out of society. Because that just pushes forth, all right, to where everything is working in an orderly fashion. All right, so this is let's also get this. This is Bar Yam Deuteronomy chapter 21, and we'll start at verse 17. And it says, let me see, verse 18. If a man have a stubborn and rebellious son, which will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and that when they have chastened him, will not hearken unto them, because a child is supposed to be reared up, all right, under the tutelage of their parents. All right, and let's get these. So I'm gonna show y'all. This is Proverbs chapter 22 and verse 6. It says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart." All right, in the true way. All right, is ultimately going into the scriptures. All right, being raised up righteously. Let's get this too. This is let me see. Let's get Sirach chapter 33. Give me a second. This is Sirach 30 and verse 8. And it reads, it says, "And horse not broken becometh headstrong, and a child left to himself will become willful." It says, "Cocker thy child, and he shall make thee afraid. Play with him, and he will bring thee to heaviness. Laugh not with him, lest thou have sorrow with him, and lest thou gnash thy teeth in the end. Give him no liberty in his youth, and wink not at his follies. Bow down his neck while he is young, and beat him on the sides while he is a child, lest he wax stubborn, and be disobedient unto thee, and so bring sorrow to thine heart. Chastise thy son, and hold him to labor, lest his lewd behavior be an offense unto thee." So ultimately, all right, shouldn't be in a sense of, to where, because Jake got this thing to where, they're buddy and they're friends, and they're two peas in a pie, which is not nothing wrong with having a tight relationship with your parents, you see. But Jake has this thing to where it's it's inordinate. It's inordinate type of way of being too friendly, with their parents, you see, when ultimately, being raised up in a scriptural standpoint, ultimately children are supposed to be reared up with discipline, all right, and being chastised, all right, because ultimately that's the correct way, pursuant to Proverbs 22 and 6. It said, "Train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart," roughly paraphrasing. So when a child won't adhere, to the admonishments and the correction and the instruction, all right, this is ultimately how this will be handled, because this is a reason why it's a lot of little niggas, a whole bunch of YNs running around present day. All right, Zadok Bar Yam Deuteronomy chapter 21 and verse 18 again. It says, "If a man have a stubborn and rebellious son," all right, they didn't take heed, to those admonishments and those warnings, "which will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and that when they have chastened him, will not hearken unto them. Then shall his father and his mother lay hold on him, and bring him unto the elders of his city, and unto the gate of his place. And they shall say unto the elders of his city, This is our son. This our son is stubborn and rebellious. He would not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. And all the men of his city shall stone him with stones, that he die. So shalt thou put evil away from among you, and all Yasha shall hear and fear." So again, going to the severity and the righteous harshness of the scriptures. You know, ultimately these things are set in place. You know, so Jake don't Jake don't get that inkling of, oh, you know, they see somebody do this, or so they got away with it. You know, cause Jake is very impressionable. You know, so ultimately, all right. So the other little boys in that city, they don't get that thought of trying their parents. You know, because the scriptures say, let all things be done decently and in order. You know, so that nips that in the bud right then and there. You know, because if you see, you know, your homeboy, or I won't say homeboy, if you see, you know, the child down the street, you know, get stoned, another boy in the nation of Yasha Ali, you know, is gonna be like, yeah, nah, I'm gonna listen to my parents. All right, if you see, you know, someone that committed adultery get put to death in front of the whole congregation, you like, nah, I'm a fear of the Lord. You know, you gonna do what's right. You know, so all of these are set into place to ultimately keep an orderly society, and that's essentially why so much adultery and you know, badass kids running rampant in America, Babylon the Great. You know, because there is no order. All right, pursuant to Yashaya Isaiah chapter 59. All right, let's get that real fast. So Yashaya, this is Isaiah chapter 59. We'll start at verse 14. It says, "And judgment is turned away backward, and justice standeth afar off. For truth is fallen in the street, and equity cannot enter." All right, true equity does not enter in the streets of America, Babylon the Great. Neither does it enter in the world. All right, this word is nakacha, nakacha, and it says straight. It says true things. It says rectitude. It says straightness. All right, integrity. Nothing is straightforward. Nothing is upright. All right, nothing is balanced. All right. Continuing on, it says, "Yeah, truth faileth, and he that departeth from evil maketh himself a prey. And the Lord saw it, and it displeased him that there was no judgment." You know, because ultimately, in a society to where it is in gross darkness, everything is running the complete opposite of a righteous society. All right, those that are essentially attempting with a sincere attempt to live righteously, all right, stand out. All right, because everybody else is on a whole nother vibration, you see. So continuing on, I want to get some more. Let's also get this. Let's get we'll get Salat. We'll get Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy chapter. Give me a second. This is Deuteronomy chapter 25, and we'll get verse 11. And it says, when men strive together, when men strive together one with another, and the wife of the one draweth near for to deliver her husband out of the hand of him that smiteth him, and putteth forth her hand and taketh him by the secrets, then thou shalt cut off her hand, thine eye shall not pity her. All right. Let's get this word for secrets. And it says mabashiam, and it says private parts, and it says genitals. All right, so ultimately, you know, going into you know, the genitals of the man that is opposite of her husband, you know, and you know, this law is set in effect for the same reason, you know, to keep order in society, you know, because ultimately, you know, if that woman did that, you know, that can put thoughts in her mind. All right, and now, you know, she, you know, wants to go and, you know, attempt adultery, you know, and that's a no-no. All right, let's get this. This is Leviticus chapter 20, and we'll get verse 10. And it says, "And the man that committeth adultery with another man's wife, even he that committeth adultery with his neighbor's wife, the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death." All right. And again, you know, in the instance of Dabar Yam, Deuteronomy chapter 25 and verse 11, essentially that can put that type of thought in that woman's mind, so just to, to deter, a woman from doing that, you know, if they seen that type of judgment take place, that will put fear into their mind. All right. And then also that cuts down the what's the word, the outcome, or the possibilities, of adultery, taking place in society, because one will be more inclined, to fear the Lord. I'm gonna get this real fast, and I'm gonna go ahead and close. Zamashaya, this is Proverbs chapter 14 and verse 26. And it says, "And the fear of the Lord is strong confidence, and his children shall have a place of refuge." By fearing the Lord, ultimately, we have a strong confidence. All right. Khan is with, fidence is fidelity, which goes back to faith. So ultimately we can abide with confidence, because ultimately we have a good understanding, all right, through the fear of the Lord, which works, which corresponds and works, with the faith, because ultimately if you want to live, all right, you're not going to do the things that's written in the scriptures not to do. You're going to take heed and adhere to the laws, all right, to the best of your ability. All right. Verse 27, it says, "The fear of the Lord is a fountain of life, to depart from the snares of death." All right. So ultimately one that loves themselves, all right, they wouldn't be things that would get them, they wouldn't be doing things that would get them killed. Ultimately going into the fear of the Lord. So I just wanted to go into, what will be seen as, severe laws in the scriptures, all right, because ultimately they are set in effect to keep an orderly society. I'm gonna get this and I'm gonna go ahead and close. All right, this is 1 Corinthians chapter 14, and we'll get verse 40. And it says, "Let all things be done decently and in order." All right, these things are set in order, all right, because ultimately, to have a well-balanced, a suitable, and a just and normal society, hey, that's why these laws are set in place, all right, because it keeps everything in order, So Adawan Tazaz Abanay Palu was what that was a beautiful edification through the spirit. Wa Adawan Taza Atam Yash Layalata Wa. Lord's will, you all have a good night. Wa Shalom Lakam, which is peace unto you all. A Shalom, Shalom.